The Syntax of Things by Arisha. Chapter 3. Wisdom. Spinner's End. Harry placed his belongings into his trunk slowly. Hermione had decided to help him pack, although Harry suspected she was only doing it to keep a close eye on him. "You will write to me, okay?" she asked, the wariness not quite absent from her voice. "You can even call me if you want to. I believe I gave you my number ages ago."
"I will,"
Harry said, shoving a pile of socks between his cloaks. "Harry, no! Put the unwashed clothes in another bag and then into your trunk, otherwise the rest of your clothes will be dirty too." Hermione made a move of grabbing the socks from his hand, but then frowned as if changing her mind and used her wand instead. "That's a brilliant idea, Hermione," said Ron, pulling back out of his trunk a big pile of wrinkled, unwashed clothes. Hermione rolled her eyes. "And we could take the bus someday if you'd like. We can meet up in Surrey, I don't know, for a walk. My parents might let me." Ron eyed her carefully. "And of course Ron could come too, you know," she added.
"Yes, I'd like that," thought Harry. "Only I can't, and you're only saying it because you think Sirius's death has broken me."
He couldn't stand people talking about Sirius anymore or treating him like that. He didn't want pity. He didn't want anything, and he was tired of playing over and over again inside his head the hopes and dreams he had allowed himself to have before Sirius was murdered. It had been foolish of him to believe that he could eventually have a family. Anyone who entered Harry's life was immediately put in danger. He should have known better than hope for something that just wasn't meant to be. He knew everything now. Dumbledore had finally told Harry the truth. The truth about the prophecy Harry had seen in Snape's memories, and the reason Voldemort wanted Harry dead.
"It is time," Dumbledore had said, "for me to tell you what I should have told you years ago, Harry."
And Harry's heart pounded in his chest as he listened through it all. By the time Dumbledore had finished, Harry was beyond control. He lashed out angrily, grabbing and throwing hard against the walls of the headmaster's office whatever item he could get his hands on, hoping to trigger a reaction. Any reaction! But Dumbledore had remained calm.
"This summer,"
Dumbledore had then continued, as if nothing at all had happened,
"I cannot let you return to your family. It is important for you to prepare yourself, to learn how to defeat anyone who might try to use your mind again. You will stay with Professor Snape, and this time you will both take your occlumency lessons very seriously."
After another emotional explosion, and when Harry had nothing else in his reach to break or smash, he accepted this horrible fate and left. He didn't have the courage to tell his friends. At first because Dumbledore had insisted that keeping it a secret would be preferable, and then because he didn't know how to. Somehow it was beyond embarrassing to announce to Ron and Hermione that he would be spending his summer with Snape. Moreover, his friends' worries would only triple at such a reveal.
"So, why are you not taking the train again?"
asked Ron, holding up into the air a pair of orange underpants. "Good!" Hermione turned her back to Ron and began collecting Harry's textbooks from under the bed.
"Dumbledore wants to talk to me in private, you know."
He tossed Hermione a sweater and she gave him a lethal look.
"I'll probably take the next one." "That's not so bad if you ask me," said Ron. "With everyone gone, you can even get to visit Hogsmeade by yourself, no?"
Harry shrugged his shoulders.
"I guess.
And if you get after midnight, you can see for yourself if what they say about Madame Rose's murder is true."
"Not again,"
groaned Harry. "You never know," said Ron. "What are you two talking about?" asked Hermione as she folded a long Gryffindor scarf and gave it to Harry.
"Ron believes Madame Rose's murder serves drinks in the nude after midnight," Harry explained, "because Fred and George told him so."
"A very reliable source," said Hermione. She wiped the sweat off her forehead and stood up. "Unfortunately for you, Ron, Harry knows better than to just wander off by himself after midnight. Am I right, Harry?"
"Absolutely,"
Harry assured her. "And he'd never visit Hogsmeade by himself," she continued.
"Aha, never,"
Harry said. With that problem solved, Hermione left to prepare for the feast. They met again outside the fat lady's portrait, and together they ran down the stairs to the great hall. The food was delicious, and Harry tried to eat as much as he could, refusing to stop even when his stomach felt ready to explode. If the Dursleys could deny him food for 2 or 3 days at a time, Harry didn't dare to imagine what Snape could do to him. He'd better have a good last meal at Hogwarts before he was thrown into starvation for good. Anxiously, he wondered what kind of house Snape lived in, and images of dark-dazzles with spiders, ghosts, and bats filled his mind. Another image popped up, sadly more realistic. It had Harry locked up in another cupboard, small, damp, and cramped. Only this time, if he wanted to be let out, he would have to memorize and recite an entire volume of advanced potions first. He grimaced at his food.
Isn't it poisons? Not this time, at least.
Luna pointed at his plate. She had deliberately left Ravenclaw's table to sit with Harry and his friends, but the prefects didn't seem to have noticed yet.
Sometimes, though, the headmaster has the elves put funny things into our meals to see what'll happen. Did you know?
Harry shook his head. It's okay, Luna. Thanks. I already ate too much, I think.
She shrugged her shoulders and kept eating. Harry snorted to himself. What if Snape had plans to torture him for real this time? The man always hated him, and this was his only chance to act under Dumbledore's nose. Yet there were still questions to be answered, and if Snape and his mum had indeed been together in the past, Harry wasn't really sure that he wanted to know about it.
Mr. Potter, a word.
Startled, Harry jumped up from his seat to see Snape standing just behind him, glaring down his large nose. Snape strode off the hall, and after Ron gave Harry a sympathetic look, Harry wiped his mouth and followed him. Snape stopped at the stairs outside the hall and spoke coldly. We are leaving tomorrow at 2 o'clock. You will, by then, have packed everything, and don't even think of being late, for I will not accept any of your poor excuses. His eyes promised death. You are expected to wait for me outside the headmaster's office at 1:30. If anyone asks...
I know I'm not stupid,
interrupted Harry. If anyone asks, you are seeing the headmaster to discuss your grades, and that will be 10 points from Gryffindor for your insolence. I trust that the House Cup winner hasn't been announced yet. Snape was glaring darkly, looking entirely displeased. Now, do you have any belongings at your relative's home that you would wish to have with you over the summer? Harry shook his head, but Snape didn't seem to believe him. Then think again, because I do not plan to apparate around with a Potter clutched on my back every time you're reminded of something that you need. You are being given the chance to visit Surrey tomorrow before we continue on in my house, and that's it. Do not expect me to bother again until September, even if what you forgot over is your own head. Harry swallowed the bile that had stuck in his throat and grit his teeth.
No need to worry, sir. All my belongings are already packed and can't wait to move in with you.
He knew that Snape was repulsed by that fact as much as he was. Snape quirked his lips in disgust, and after taking another 10 points from Gryffindor, he left. When dinner was over, Harry and Ron played the last chess game of the year. Harry lost and let his forehead fall on the chessboard, the queen piercing his ear with a tiny sword as she tried to shove him away. Hermione had fallen asleep on the common room sofa while reading a Muggle book. Harry half expected Ron to say something, probably bring up Sirius again, or ask Harry how he was planning to survive the summer. Ron loved to hear funny stories about Dudley, and although Harry kept the worst incidents well hidden from his wizarding life, some of them he could share. Next September there would be nothing to tell, though, and Harry was positively sure that Snape wasn't going to be a very delightful housemate, either. He recalled Sirius promising him that they would live together someday. If Harry had been a little bit smarter, if he knew how to tell the difference between real visions and the hallucinations Voldemort had sent to him, if only he had trained better, harder, and more consistently. Now Sirius would be alive. Still, sometimes Harry couldn't help but blame Sirius for his demise just as much. His mind wandered from Creature to Sirius's mother, and how Sirius should have stayed inside the safety of Grimmaild's wards, but instead chose to sneak out while everybody had warned him not to. When Ron collected the chess pieces in a silent understanding, Harry sat up and nodded good night before going to bed. The next morning found the common room loud and crowded. With the arrival of Hogwarts Express being only a few hours away, everyone was in a rush to finish packing. Some students were exchanging gifts, while others were searching for clothes and books they had only now realized were missing. Ron couldn't find a particular pair of shoes, so he threw everything out of his trunk and put it back in one messy big pile. Dean had deliberately put himself in charge of appointing seats to the younger students in order to prevent the usual fuss upon boarding. Luna was casually carrying around an enormous stack of the Quibbler's latest issue, apparently hoping to sell some copies on the go, and had somehow meandered her way into the Gryffindor Tower. As for Harry, he watched the ongoing panic around him dully, fascinated with everyone's stampede, as he himself hadn't bothered getting up yet. Despite having slept well, he didn't feel rested at all, and he was so drowsy he was startled when Luna sat beside him and placed a Quibbler issue on his belly, patting it twice.
Here, it's free for you.
Harry turned a page drowsily and read, "Ancient ruins came from space, what Muggle scientists claim and how the secret was revealed." He tried to seem flattered by her gift and gave her a forced smile.
Oh, thanks, Luna. Looks interesting.
You don't need to force yourself to like it just now. It'll find the way to your heart in time, I'm sure of it. Have a nice summer, Harry.
She left the Gryffindor dormitory in a hopping manner, leaving Harry perplexed and yawning. Ron punched him on the side of the head lightly. "Are you going to wake up already, or what?" Harry rubbed his face and sat up lazily. What wouldn't he give to spend another day at Hogwarts, he thought, but denying his upcoming doom wasn't going to make it any more bearable. "Up!" Ron nudged him again, and Harry punched him back on the ribs as soon as he caught him off guard. Soon enough, they fell back to the bed wrestling, and it was only when Ron forced Harry's head inside a pillowcase that it stopped. "How immature can you two be?" asked Hermione from the door. "You've no idea," Ron chuckled as she rolled her eyes. Harry escorted them to the great hall before they left. Hermione hugged him tightly, giving him a soft kiss on the cheek, which made Ron scrunch his face up and look away. He promised them that he'd be writing once a week, because that was what they wanted to hear, and he reassured them that everything was going to be all right. As he watched them leave, the bony thestrals pulling the heavy carriages away, he suddenly felt alone, so terribly alone and empty, as if no happiness would ever find its way through his soul again. To make proof against that, he drew out his wand and cast the Patronus charm, thinking of his mum and dad. A silver stag spurted out of the tip of his wand and bounced around the bushes, galloping away to the forest. Relieved, Harry shut his eyes. If he was still able to conjure some tiny bits of happiness from within, he wasn't entirely lost. The stag returned and shoved his head to Harry's hand, demanding to be pet. The sensation wasn't exactly real. It reminded him of water more than actual flesh. His fingers slipped through the strange substance. With a heavy heart, he returned to the castle and dragged his trunk down the stairs until he reached the headmaster's office. He sat on his trunk and waited for Snape, drumming his wand to his knee rhythmically. Maybe Snape was indeed a vampire, after all, thought Harry, as he remembered Snape's sallow skin. Or maybe he lived in a dungeon full of dead bodies, carefully stored in bulky freezers so he could drink their blood at night. He'd probably lock Harry in a cell as well and make him watch as he'd fly around in his bat farm, randomly picking his victims before eating them. Harry shuddered. He wasn't sure he could survive an entire summer drinking nothing but human blood. "Potter." Harry looked up. His utterance was met with an arched eyebrow.
Yeah, morning.
"Not anymore, unless you have completely lost your touch with reality. It's 2 PM."
Oh, all right.
Snape seemed annoyed already, and his own denial about the situation was written all over his face. "We are going to use the flu network from the headmaster's office, which will transport us to an establishment near my home. Once there, I expect you to keep a low profile and refrain from drawing any attention to yourself. If you disobey me on this, you will face dire consequences. Am I clear, Potter?" He pointed his wand at Harry, and Harry had no time to dodge when a spell hit him and he fell to the ground. Confused, he looked around until he realized that the charm hadn't been directed at him but his trunk, which had now shrunk to the size of a miniature. Harry put it up and shoved it into the back pocket of his jeans. Snape peered down at Harry, who quickly averted his eyes and stood up. Dumbledore greeted them from his high-backed chair, but both Harry and Snape responded with grim faces. Dumbledore then pulled Snape aside for a last word, but as much as Harry tried, he didn't manage to hear what Dumbledore told Snape.
"I'm sure you'll do wonderfully,"
said Dumbledore at last. "Undoubtedly," Snape retorted. "Please do keep your own vacation less adventurous than intended." And with that quizzical comment, Snape activated the flu. "Do I seem like I have all day, Potter?" he snapped. Harry glanced at Dumbledore sadly, but walked over to Snape, his feet heavily brushing the carpet. Even facing Voldemort again would be less ghastly a fate, Harry thought, as Snape wrapped his hand around his own and squeezed. "Ready?" Harry nodded. "The fox is in," barked Snape, and suddenly the office was gone. They landed at the ashy fireplace of a small pub. Snape released his hand as soon as the world stopped swirling, and Harry rubbed his fingers on his shirt as though to wipe off the touch. Then he took a look around, curiously. The Fox's Inn was a traditional alehouse, drenched in the smell of sweat and smoke. There were 6 hand pumps serving beers across the counter, with small tables all around and dirty wooden floorboards. A man greeted Snape, upholding his beer.
Ah, Severus, at last, man. Oi, what's with the boy? Home teacher now, are you?
Harry kept his head down, hoping that no one would notice his scar, and the man was met with a deadly glare from Snape as they walked past him. Snape pushed Harry out the door hurriedly, and next thing Harry knew, he was standing on a street corner of a dark neighborhood with 2 endless rows of identical houses. He wondered if they were far from central London, plans to run away from Snape already taking form in his mind. "Follow me," Snape said. Harry followed. The fog and the muddy pavement were making him feel uneasy. Snape's robes were grazing against the mud and had become wet at the edges. Their feet made a plopping sound against the ground with every step they took. The rain couldn't have stopped long ago, Harry thought, because the strong scent of wetness and mildew was still in the air. He read a sign nailed on a brick wall to his left. "Spinner's End."
Where are we?
he asked.
Are you incapable of reading? No, I mean, where exactly?
Snape glared at him wryly for a moment. "Northern England."
Oh, so you spend your summers here?
"Usually,"
I didn't know you had a house of your own.
Harry admitted. He shoved his hands into his sweatshirt to warm them up. "Had you assumed I'm a clutchard?"
A what?
Harry's eyebrows rose to his hairline.
Homeless. Oh, no, I just thought you lived at Hogwarts, you know.
"Since you don't really seem to have a life," he almost added. Snape didn't answer. A horrid thought crossed Harry's mind.
Do you live alone?
If Snape had a wife and Harry was forced to live with both of them, he'd become a kosher of his own, he decided. Not anymore, Potter, obviously. Oh, right. As accustomed as he was to being unwanted, Harry couldn't help the awkwardness that overwhelmed him. It was obvious that Snape hated him, and the feeling was rather mutual. Aunt Petunia would never fumble through his brain, at least, and back in Surrey, he knew that if he stayed silent and hidden for the best part of the day, he'd be granted with some peace of mind. Snape wasn't like that, though. Harry had no idea what Snape was like. They stopped in front of an old brick house, and Snape crossed the small yard, taking out a ring of keys. As soon as Snape unlocked the door, the smell of musty air hit Harry's nostrils, and he decided that the place hadn't been inhabited for a very long time. Snape held the door open, and Harry walked in, finding himself in the middle of a small sitting room. Snape opened all the shutters immediately, letting the light stream in and bring into sight the clouds of dust that filled the room. The walls were completely covered in crooked bookshelves. Most of the books were stacked and crowded in a disorganized, entirely chaotic manner. A shabby time-worn sofa, an old armchair, and a rickety table stood grouped together in front of an ashy fireplace. Snape disappeared behind a door, barking, "Stay there!" Harry did, glancing around inquisitively. There was no central hallway to the house, but the living room had 3 identical doors surrounding it. The first one revealed a narrow staircase from which Snape had gone upstairs. The second one was locked, and the third one led to a kitchen. The kitchen was even smaller than the living room, with a wooden table in the corner and 2 chairs under it, linked together by a silver thread of cobweb. With a sigh of relief, Harry located the fridge and opened it, only to find it completely empty. He searched the cabinets one by one, finding plates, glasses, and some pots and pans, along with an empty biscuit box. He took it out and threw it in the trash bin under the sink, checked the faucet's function, looked for sharp knives he could use just in case, and squatted down to examine the items in the bottom drawer. An old sewing set and a small pouch with buttons.
"Are you through sticking your nose where it doesn't belong, Potter?" Snape stood at the door, holding his dirtied cloak in a pile while unbuttoning the first buttons of his coat. With a wave of his hand, the drawer was magically banged closed, and Harry drew his fingers away just in time. "I'll do the laundry soon, but that will be exclusively for my own clothes. You may wash yours when I'm done, and I assure you if you leave anything behind, I will burn it." "Then I'll just have to walk around naked, I guess."
Before Harry knew it, Snape had stritten over and grabbed him by the shirt front, pushing him against the counter violently. His breath was only inches from his face. "I will say this once, you insolent brat, and you'd better listen carefully. This isn't Hogwarts, nor your cozy little Gryffindor house, in which no one will ever bother to teach you respect.
Dumbledore cannot protect you here, so do yourself a favor and behave. You will not talk back to me, you will not show cheek, and for the time being, Potter, you will pretend I don't exist, I know.
Snape stared.
Anything else, sir?
Snape unclenched Harry's shirt and stepped back.
Lunch is always served at 1 o'clock and dinner at 8. Be late and you will not eat at all. We will practice occlumency from 6 to 7. You are expected to close your mind every day before our lessons. Otherwise, I will not hesitate to kick you out and let you sleep on the streets. You are not permitted to leave the house without my accompaniment, and you will not touch any of my belongings without permission. If you do so, I will know.
Harry shrugged. Now, follow me. They climbed up the small staircase, and it creaked with every step, finally leading them to a small hallway with another set of 3 doors. Snape opened the first one, and Harry walked in. The room was dark, and except for a single bed in the far end of it and a small nightstand, it was rather empty too. 2 shelves were nailed to the wall, but no books or other items were placed upon them. A broken closet with several tilted drawers was near the bed, and the curtains on the window were shredded. Harry wondered if this used to be Snape's old room from when he was a child, sure that many years must have had passed since the last time someone had slept in here. He took his trunk out of his pocket and restored it to its normal size. Snape considered the room for a moment, then, "The bathroom is at the far end of the hallway. The other door leads to my own bedroom, which you will never enter despite your childish curiosity. Do you understand?"
Yes. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Excellent. Harry heard the bang of the door closing behind him and took off his glasses, falling to the bed face down and breathing his tension off. Excellent!